Please click on the thumbs up button and the subscribe button if you enjoyed my vlog. Bye for now. Hey everybody, I thought I would share a few of my drawings and painting with you today, and hopefully give a few tips. This particular painting in watercolour was the first one I ever did for an exhibition. They wanted me to sell it, and I put non-applicable on the sign because I wanted to keep it to remind me of what it was like, because when we do as paintings we think that's the best it's going to be, but of course it's changed since then. Well, this was the first drawing I did with the technique I use now, which is more or less 3D looking. It looks as though it's coming out of the picture, and to do these, all the drawings I do now is I start off with H, which stands for hard, and I go on and probably use H 1, 2, 3, and B, which stands for black. I'll probably start off with B2 and go up to about B6, and that will get that painting, that drawing done for me. Unfortunately, you can see a backlight on it, so you don't get the full effect on it, and the backlight is coming in through the shed door. Well, there you can see the backlight that I referred to. In fact, you can see out into the garden, so I'm turning it a little bit. But what I wanted to say was it's in the wrong coloured frame for starters. It's foliage, and it didn't look right, so I put a little bit of pencil line on the back there and fused it all in to make it look darker. But I've since found out I don't have to do that, and I'll explain that in a while. So once again, H to start off, and most techniques here is being with the pencil flat onto the paper rather than pointing it downhill. I think I only pointed it downhill just to sketch it out, but you can see that this particular piece is what can I say, true to life. If you're purchasing a drawing or a painting, particularly of flowers, which I do and like doing, and this one's foliage of course, you could do think about if it looks as though it's been done on a plant or out of a book. And if you think it's been done out of a book, that will affect the price you want to pay for it. Most of my work in the summertime is straight out of the garden, and but I can't remember what this plant was, to be honest with you. But again, everything has been done on using H. Now, the thing to remember about doing a drawing or a painting is that you've got to consider where the frame's going to end up. Now, luckily on this one the frame is higher than the drawing, and but if you're going to do a drawing and it's going to take you, in this case it took me probably 2 or 3 days to complete, keep going back to it. If you're going to spend that much time, you really need to be looking at where the drawing is going to be in relation to putting it in a frame. You can see at the very top of this frame it's been round a bit, and if I was to put it in an exhibition I would put it in a different frame because it looks tatty. And the last thing you want to do is people being put off by the frame. What tends to happen is when things are exhibition, drawings and paintings go in an exhibition, people's eyes are drawn to a particular thing that they like, and they might think, oh, that's a beautiful drawing, I'll pay for that, I know a place where that'll look lovely. The last thing they'll want to do is see it in a very poorly framed situation like that. So I go around, I look at different places, and I wait until I see bargains for frames and indeed paper as well. I think this particular piece of paper came from Bridlington in a sale in a workshop, and I got loads of paper because it was going very cheap at that time. And that's another issue. You don't have to pay a lot of money out to become good, proficient at what you want to do. But if you want to get a lot of money for the paintings and drawings that you do, expect to use top class paper and frames. But I just wanted to illustrate that you don't have to have expensive things to produce decent work. You do that later. And in fact, you could copy this onto a piece that you wanted to do on expensive paper, or you could even paint it if you wanted. It would be entirely up to you. But if you're looking at exhibiting it, then look round for a better frame. In fact, I think a better frame would be brown rather than white, and I could possibly get away with cutting this down a little bit to go into a frame, and that's another aspect of it. You don't always have to use all the paper that you've got there. You can cut it down to size, but I like to use A4 and A5. Particularly A5 because I like doing detailed work, but some people don't. Some people like to work big, and also some people like to work fast, and I like to work slow, preferably in a quiet place, and going back to it and keep going back to it. Having a rest from it, probably start doing another drawing or painting, and then going back to that one and thinking, oh yeah, I can see a problem there. I knew there was a problem, but I couldn't see where it was before. I'm going to rectify it. And you can rectify these things without doing a lot of rubbing out. Now you can see on this one I've put my name in the bottom, and there'll be a date on as well, and that's possibly done that because it might be exhibited. Now I have to say that the situation, because they're in the shed, they do not give a true likeness of what it really is, and they look a lot better than you can see on this grained HD film. But I mentioned earlier, if you're going to rub out, use putty rubber. Use it lightly if it's cheap paper. If it's cheap drawing paper, everything has to be done very lightly, or you go through the paper. You don't want to do that after spending hours on a drawing. And now this one, it didn't have anything in the background, whereas the one you can see to the left, I shaded it a little bit. And I left it and I thought, won't write that to me. But after leaving it for some time, the white at the back has faded a little bit and it's gone a little bit yellow, which has worked in my favour because I don't have to do anything to the background. You can see again on this particular shot that there's light coming in from the door of the shed. I just couldn't get the right angle. There's two flowers there for the price of one. And I think that is a much better frame than the last one. Again, it might not be quite right, but when you see it properly, it looks a lot better. Now, one thing to remember when you're doing a drawing and you're close to it, as I do, it always looks different when you stand back. So when you get going and you're putting layer after layer after layer on, as I do, keep standing back and having a look to see if it looks right or not. Because when you're up close, you think, oh, it's too dark that. But when you get a couple of meters away from it, you might think it's not dark enough. And often it's not dark enough. Now you can see on the edges of the leaf on the left hand side, it looks as though it's rounded, and that is by building up shading, building up and building up and building up. And sometimes I've used on that, I've started with H, as I said before. On that I might have used H2, H3, H4, H standing for hard. And then I've gone on to using B for black, B2, B3 and B4 on the harder lines, the darker lines you can see. And now they also keep your pencils sharp if you can, but as you go the B's, it gets more and more difficult to keep a pointed edge on, and you might waste a lot of money trying to get a pointed edge on by using a pencil sharpener or a knife. So get it so far and then use sandpaper on the tip of the pencil, and that will get you your pointed edge, and so you don't have to keep sharpening all the time. And then of course keep turning the pencil around I should say, and that will help to keep a pointed edge. And the pointed edge works wonderful in some circumstances, but in others you may have to have a long piece of graphite, when I say long, about a quarter of an inch, and lay it flat on the canvas, and that will get you a different effect. One effect that you get is by well, let me explain a little bit about the paper first, particularly if it's a cheap paper. Cheap paper is probably, I don't know, a poor quality paper, but in better quality paper you might get, under a microscope you could get peaks and troughs, and if it looks like that anyway. And if you lay the pencil down on better quality paper, it goes onto the peak and misses the trough, and you can get some really good leaf formations by laying it flat. Sometimes you can get formations you want to get by raising the pencil a little bit, but very rarely do I use a pencil where it's straight down to the paper. Now you'll have recognised by now that I have a very strong Yorkshire accent, and if you don't understand my accent, please let me know, but I have been told to speak in accent. The thing about art and any other subject that needs learning is it cuts across every boundary. Everybody can do art to some degree if they want to, but it takes practice and practice to get reasonable work out. So the dialect doesn't matter, the articulations are more important. But in this particular case, this is a tulip at night, and you can see that it looks a little bit odd, and that's because it's real, and it's not out of any book at all. And as I mentioned earlier, this may have a bearing on whether you want to pay a little bit more for the drawing or painting. So if it looks a little bit odd like that, it's possibly due to being straight out of the ground. Excuse me, I'm burping. And I personally prefer to draw and paint flowers that are out of the ground, and often I only use a tiny little bit of foliage because it takes so long to do the detailed work. This particular drawing has only been hanging for a day or two, and you can see the background is really shiny white, and you can see the one to the left of it has gone pale. It's gone pale by hanging in the shed. So instead of me messing about putting more shading in the background to make it look stand out more, I'm leaving it on purpose so that when it's been in the shed a while, the background, the paper itself, will go discoloured, and it will bring the foliage out forward a little bit. So it saved me work, and it'll look better as well. And I learned that by mistake. Now this particular frame is it's an A5, and I got this from a sale. And now it's important if you can't get, if you are going to show your work, you can only charge a certain amount for a drawing like that, so you need to get a nice looking frame but cheap as possible. And I think I paid about £3 for that particular frame, so it doesn't look too bad. But once again, here we have cheap paper, we have a cheap frame, and also the particular drawing coloured pencils I use were also very cheap, and it's produced a reasonable drawing. The colours are not as good as they would be if I used top quality pencils, and also you have to remember that if you are using watercolour paints, if you're exhibiting, you need quality paints as well. But when you're beginning to paint, go for anything that you can get, and that applies also to brushes. I've got some very expensive brushes, and I very rarely use them for work like this. This is what I call practice work, and I've got some cheap brushes as well, and the one I really like is a nylon that's been cut in a wedge shape, and I think it cost me about 50p, and it'll wear away and I'll probably get another one. So it all depends what you want to do with the paintings. If you want to get quality paintings out there on exhibits, you will really need to start looking at more expensive paint, paper and brushes. But until you get some basics behind you, it's not necessary. If you're just going to paint for enjoyment, there is no need to pay expensive gear. And I know a lot of people will tell you otherwise, but I've got a lot of gear which I've acquired over the years, and half of it will probably not get used. Please also remember that what works for one person doesn't work for another, and you have to find your own method. I hope you've enjoyed my videos. Bye for now.